It was a crisp autumn morning when I received the news of Aunt Clarissa's passing. She had always been an eccentric figure in our family, a woman with a penchant for oddities, antiquities, and unsurprisingly, cats. She had a quaint old Victorian house, nestled on the outskirts of the small town of Windermere. Despite her peculiar ways, she had a heart of gold for me, and her death left a void that was hard to fill. As her only nephew, I was sent a box of her belongings that I approached with a mix of sorrow and nostalgia. Among the myriad of trinkets and keepsakes, one item stood out: a dusty, antique-looking book bound in weathered leather. The cover was embossed with strange symbols, and the pages, yellowed with age, were filled with intricate illustrations and cryptic text. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, and as I flipped through its pages, I felt an inexplicable pull, a curiosity that demanded to be satisfied. That night, after a few glasses of absinthe, Aunt Clarissa's favorite drink, I sat down to delve into the mysteries of the book. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. The book, titled The Arcane Art of Animal Command, was a manual on controlling animals through the use of magic. Each chapter detailed spells and incantations, accompanied by elaborate drawings of animals in various states of enchantment. The initial excitement was overwhelming. I decided to try a simple spell to test its authenticity, choosing my cat, Whiskers, as the unsuspecting subject. I recited the incantation carefully, feeling a strange energy pulse through my veins. To my astonishment, Whiskers, who had been lounging indifferently on the couch, suddenly perked up and obeyed my command to fetch a ball of yarn. It was a surreal moment, one that confirmed the book's power. Over the next few days, I experimented cautiously, honing my newfound skills. I commanded birds to sing specific tunes, instructed squirrels to fetch acorns, and even made a stray dog perform a series of amusing tricks. The possibilities seemed endless, and my confidence grew with each successful spell. As I delved deeper into the book, I realized it contained more than just spells for controlling animals. There were chapters on summoning creatures, creating protective wards, and manipulating the elements. The more I read, the more I became engrossed, often losing track of time as I pored over the ancient text. My fascination bordered on obsession, and it wasn't long before I began to neglect other aspects of my life. Unbeknownst to me, my activities had not gone unnoticed. In a realm parallel to ours, a treasure goblin named Grizzle was meticulously working through his list of items to steal. Grizzle was a seasoned thief, renowned for his cunning and resourcefulness. His list was extensive, filled with rare and valuable artifacts, and he took great pride in his work. Each item on his list had been carefully chosen for its unique properties, and Grizzle had mastered various magical techniques to acquire these treasures, often outsmarting the most vigilant of guards. One fateful evening, as Grizzle was poring over his list, a new item appeared: the antique book. Its magical properties were well known in the goblin world, and it was considered a highly coveted prize. The book was said to contain spells of unparalleled power, including incantations that could control the elements, summon mythical creatures, and bend reality itself. Such spells would provide Grizzle with an immense advantage in his thieving endeavors, allowing him to achieve feats that were previously impossible. Grizzle's eyes gleamed with greed as he read the description. He knew that acquiring the book would not only elevate his status among his peers but also grant him unprecedented power. With such an artifact in his possession, he could become the most formidable thief in the goblin realm, capable of orchestrating heists that would be talked about for centuries. Driven by this newfound ambition, Grizzle immediately set his sights on the book, determined to make it his own at any cost. It was a quiet night, the kind where the silence feels almost tangible. I was drinking and engrossed in the book, practicing a particularly complex spell, when a sudden shimmer in the air caught my attention. Before I could react, a golden portal materialized in front of me, and out stepped a small, grotesque creature. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Short and stout, with leathery skin, sharp teeth, and glowing yellow eyes. A treasure goblin. The goblin's eyes locked onto the book, and without a moment's hesitation, he lunged at it. Instinctively, I kicked out, sending the creature sprawling across the floor. The goblin let out a guttural snarl, clearly enraged. It scrambled back into the portal, which closed with a flash of light. For a moment, I sat there, stunned and bewildered. Had I really just seen a goblin? Or was it the absinthe playing tricks on my mind? I looked at the book, then at the empty space where the portal had been, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. Back in his realm, Grizzle was seething with rage. Never before had he been so humiliated. He paced back and forth, fuming over his failure. The book was within his grasp, and yet he had been thwarted by a mere human. He couldn't let this stand. Determined to succeed, Grizzle began devising a new plan. This time, he wouldn't rely on brute force. He would use his cunning and guile to outsmart the human and claim the book. After all, he was a treasure goblin, and no mere mortal could outwit him. Grizzle's plan was straightforward and efficient. He knew he needed to act quickly, so he decided to strike the very next night. He recalled how the human had been drinking absinthe and appeared less alert during the late hours. This would be the perfect time to make his move. First, Grizzle would gather a small vial of sleeping powder, a potent concoction that could render the human unconscious with just a whiff. He would also bring a shadow cloak to enhance his natural goblin stealth, making him nearly invisible in the darkness. The next night, I was on high alert. Despite my initial disbelief, I couldn't shake the feeling that the goblin encounter had been real. Anticipating another visit, I prepared my home with makeshift defenses. I kept a flashlight and a broomstick by my side, ready to fend off any intruders. Sure enough, the golden portal appeared again, and out stepped Grizzle. This time, he moved more sneakily, his eyes scanning the room with wary precision. The tension was palpable as we stared each other down. The goblin made a feint towards the book, but I was ready. Swinging the broomstick, I managed to knock him back. He quickly recovered, dodging my next strike with surprising agility. The struggle continued, each of us refusing to back down. Grizzle lunged at me with a snarl, his sharp claws aiming for the book. I countered with another swift swing of the broomstick, hitting him squarely and sending him sprawling. For a moment, he lay there, stunned and visibly enraged. With a look of frustration, Grizzle scrambled to his feet, glaring at me with fiery eyes. He darted towards the golden portal, and just as I made another attempt to stop him, he leaped through it. The portal closed behind him in a flash of light, leaving me panting and shaken. The goblin was indeed real, and his ability to escape through his portal meant he could return at any time. His anger was clear, and I knew he would be back. The stakes were high, and I had to find a way to end this, once and for all. Determined to catch the goblin, I spent the next day setting traps around my home. I rigged the windows and doors with makeshift alarms, using pots and pans that would clatter loudly if disturbed. I also placed tripwires and snares in strategic locations, hoping to catch the goblin off guard. As night fell, I waited in anticipation, the book securely tucked under my arm. I could feel the tension mounting with each passing minute, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew the goblin would return, and this time I was ready to catch him. It was well past midnight when the portal opened once more. Grizzle stepped through, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the various traps I had set. He moved cautiously, but I could see the determination in his eyes. This was his final attempt, and he wasn't going to back down easily. The goblin crept forward, avoiding the tripwires and alarms with surprising deftness. But just as he reached the book, a snare tightened around his ankle, yanking him off his feet. He let out a shriek of frustration as he dangled upside down, struggling to free himself. I approached him slowly with my broomstick in hand. "Why are you after this book?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Grizzle glared at me, his eyes filled with malice.
"It's a treasure, and treasures belong to me. Let me go, human, or you'll regret it."
But I wasn't about to be intimidated. I said, "Not until you tell me how to stop you from coming back." The goblin hesitated. Then a sly grin spread across his face.
"I can offer you something in exchange for my freedom. It's a relic that allows you to create portals. Think about it. You'll have the ability to go anywhere and steal anything."
The offer was tempting, and I could see the truth in his eyes. I weighed my options carefully, then finally nodded. "Give me the relic, and I'll let you go." Grizzle reached into a pouch at his side and produced a small, ornate device. The relic was a beautifully crafted artifact, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. It was made of a dark, polished metal, intricately engraved with runes and symbols that glowed faintly with an eerie light. In the center was a small, gleaming gem that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As I took the relic from him, I felt a surge of power emanating from it, a strange energy that sent a shiver down my spine. Grizzle's reluctance to part with it was evident, and I sensed the relic's significance. Grizzle's eyes flickered with a mix of pride and regret as he began to speak.
"This relic was forged in a parallel world on the peaks of the Ariat summit by the ancient sorcerer Talrasha. It draws its power from the very fabric of reality in that world, allowing the wielder to bend space and time. With it, you can create portals to any place you desire. But beware, human. This power comes at a cost."
True to my word, I cut him down and watched as he scrambled back into the portal, which closed behind him with a flash. Holding the relic in my hand, I couldn't help but marvel at its craftsmanship and the potential it held. The goblin was gone, but I knew my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. With the Portal Maker relic in my possession, I began to experiment with its capabilities. At first, I used it sparingly, creating small portals to nearby locations. I stole trivial items, food, trinkets, things that wouldn't be missed. The thrill of using the relic was exhilarating, and I found myself becoming increasingly daring. As my confidence grew, so did my greed. I started targeting more valuable items, jewelry, cash, and rare artifacts. The portals made it easy to bypass security systems, and I quickly amassed a small fortune. The power was intoxicating, and I reveled in my newfound wealth. However, with each use of the relic, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. My skin grew rougher, my nails sharper, and my features more grotesque. At first, I dismissed these changes as minor side effects, but as time went on, they became impossible to ignore. One morning, as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, the full extent of my transformation became clear. My once human features had morphed into those of a goblin. Panic set in as I realized the relic had cursed me, turning me into the very creature I had fought against. Desperation led me to search the book for a solution, but there was nothing about reversing the transformation. The curse was irreversible, and I was doomed to live as a goblin. In time, I came to accept my fate, embracing my new identity. As the transformation completed, I found myself driven by an insatiable greed. The relic's power had corrupted me entirely, and I continued to use it to steal and amass wealth. I became a true treasure goblin, perpetuating the cycle of greed and theft. And so, the curse lives on, passed from one goblin to the next, each driven by the same insatiable hunger for treasure. The book remains hidden, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim, ready to continue the cycle of magic and madness.